Tonight, remembering an American giant. Colin Powell has died after a battle with COVID-19. The retired four-star general who became the nation's first black Secretary of State, dying from the virus while he was also battling cancer. Flags at half-staff across the country tonight, and Andrea Mitchell joins Top Story with a look at his life, legacy, and the tributes pouring in. The growing battle over vaccine mandates for police. The viral video of a Seattle officer quitting his job ahead of a vaccine deadline. And in Chicago, thousands of officers now at risk of unpaid leave as a feud escalates between a police union and the city's mayor. Kidnapped in Haiti. The FBI now helping to save 17 American and Canadian missionaries kidnapped at gunpoint by one of the country's most powerful gangs. Children among the missing. What we're learning about the rescue efforts tonight as protests erupt across Haiti. Plus, Trump under oath. The former president ordered to testify today. The lawsuit alleging a group of protesters were violently attacked by his security guards. A disturbing story out of Philadelphia. A woman raped on a public train. Authorities say no one on board tried to help her or even call 911. And together at last, the couple tying the knot at the hospital after they refused to let the coronavirus delay their wedding one more time. Top Story starts right now. Good evening, I'm Ellison Barber in for Tom. We begin Top Story tonight by remembering trailblazing soldier and statesman Colin Powell, who has died at age 84 from complications due to COVID-19. The four-star general serving under multiple presidents before becoming the first black Secretary of State. His family confirming his passing today, saying he was fully vaccinated but became infected while being treated for cancer and Parkinson's disease. President Biden ordering all flags to be flown at half-staff through the week, saying Powell embodied the highest ideals of a warrior and diplomat, adding he will be remembered in history as one of our great Americans. Former President Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Jimmy Carter, and George W. Bush among political leaders at home and abroad paying tribute to Powell tonight. NBC's Andrea Mitchell leads us off from Washington with a look at his life and groundbreaking career.
He was the first black chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leading the charge in Desert Storm.
Our strategy to go after this army is very, very simple. First, we're going to cut it off, and then we're going to kill it.
Colin Powell, who started as an infantryman during 2 tours in Vietnam, instantly became a household name. Later as America's first black Secretary of State. Succumbing to COVID, Powell was fully vaccinated, but had suffered from prostate cancer and in recent years multiple myeloma and Parkinson's. Once one of America's most popular figures, many urged him to run for president.
Any regrets that you didn't run? You write in the book about how wrenching the decision was.
I had to think about it because it was expected of me, and I'm a soldier. But after a few weeks of it, I realized this is just not me. This is not what I could do.
His so-called Pottery Barn rule of war, if you break it, you own it, led him to privately oppose the Iraq War. We were with him in Afghanistan in 2002.
What is it going to take to put the country back together?
It's going to take the effort of the entire international community.
A low point a year later, making the case to the UN that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, mistakenly accepting the CIA's pretext for invading Iraq. No weapons were ever found, an episode he said he deeply regretted. In 2008, Powell broke from the Republican Party, endorsing Barack Obama and strongly criticizing Donald Trump's challenge to Obama's birthright.
The correct answer is he is not a Muslim. He's a Christian. He's always been a Christian. But the really right answer is, what if he is? Is there something wrong with being a Muslim in this country? The answer is no. That's not America.
Tributes tonight from around the world, including President Biden.
He's not only a dear friend and a patriot, one of our great military leaders and a man of overwhelming decency.
Though he often stayed out of the spotlight, one exception this moment 2 years ago.
When I walked up to him, I said, "You're General Colin Powell," and he said, "Yes, I am."
I knew he was one of me. He was one of my guys.
When Powell's car got a flat, military veteran Anthony Maggart, an amputee, pulling over to help him fix it. Powell later writing on Facebook, "Thanks, Anthony, you touched my soul and reminded me of what this country is all about. Let's stop screaming at each other. Let's just take care of each other."
NBC News Chief Washington Correspondent Andrea Mitchell joins us now. Andrea, you've covered the State Department for a long time. What did you think his legacy, or what do you think, rather, his legacy is at the State Department?
Allison, Secretary Blinken made it very clear today that he cared about the workforce. He cared about the people. He instituted training programs for State Department employees overseas and here in the U.S. He always cared about his people, just as he cared about the troops in his military career. I covered him when he was a Deputy National Security Advisor, cleaning up the mess after Iran-Contra for Ronald Reagan, and then National Security Advisor. And then, of course, when he was Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he then, as Secretary of State, argued privately against going into Iraq. Very strongly, privately. He did not do that publicly because he believed in the chain of command. And he did worry about the CIA analysis of weapons of mass destruction with Saddam Hussein as a pretext for war in Iraq. Worried very much about it, went to the CIA for the weekend prior to that fateful UN Security Council meeting in February of 2003, and went over all of the analysis bit by bit with the head of the CIA and all the analysts, and thought he had scrubbed it of all the misinformation. And of course, it was fatally flawed. And he mistakenly presented an incorrect case to the world, to America and to the world, to justify that war. He regretted it to the rest of his life. That said, he just, went on with his life as best he could, and devoted himself after he left the State Department to public service in a completely different way, with America's promise, with educating young, urban, largely minority children, as well as the often minority and immigrant and first-generation students in New York City at City College, his alma mater, with the Colin Powell Center, which was really to what he dedicated himself in his later years.
Thank you, Andrea. For more on the former Secretary of State's battle with cancer and COVID, we want to bring in NBC News senior medical correspondent, Dr. John Torres. Dr. Torres, as Andrea said, Powell had multiple myeloma, which is a type of cancer that affects blood cells. He also had Parkinson's disease. How could all of that have factored into his ability to fight COVID-19?
And Ellison, on top of that, it's his age as well. And those are the risk factors for having complications from COVID. And so he was fully vaccinated. What we don't know is, did he get that third vaccine or that booster? But even if that had happened and he was vaccinated beyond fully vaccinated, the fact that his immune system was weak for a few reasons means that those vaccines weren't working as well in him as they would in other people. Number one, his age, 84. That's an age where your immune system starts getting suppressed. It doesn't work as well as it did when you're younger. Number two, the multiple myeloma that he was dealing with. Chemotherapy, radiation therapy, immunotherapy, all those therapies take a big hit on your immune system. So your immune system isn't strong and can't really fight those diseases, even though they've been primed by the vaccine. And then Parkinson's as well. Parkinson's, we know, doesn't mean you're going to catch COVID more likely, but it means that you're going to have a harder time dealing with COVID. So all those things can complicate how he reacts to COVID. And in his case, unfortunately, that reaction meant that he ended up having COVID, ended up getting complications, and ending up dying from it.
For people who heard this story and they maybe saw the headline that he died of COVID-19 and he was fully vaccinated and didn't see anything else about his health conditions around that, what do you want them to know tonight about the effectiveness of the vaccines available in this country?
And I think the main thing I want them to know is you can't look at this and say the vaccines are not effective, because, again, his immune system was weak, and so the vaccines wouldn't take hold in his immune system. But for the average person, those of us that are healthy, vaccines work fantastically. We know they're very effective. The other thing I need to point out is the fact that people like this, like Colin Powell, who have weakened immune systems, who can't get the vaccine to the strong point where we want it to be, the rest of us need to protect them. And so when people say it's an individual decision, it's not. It's a community decision. You're not just protecting yourself, you're protecting the vulnerable around us, including people like General Colin Powell and those others who the vaccine might not work as well for. And so we need to remember that this decision is something that affects everyone around us and our whole community, and that's why we should get vaccinated. And one final point I want to make is that I actually served under Colin Powell when I was in the Air Force in my younger years, and I know myself and the others that served under him were very proud to have done that, and certainly are going to miss him.
Thank you, Dr. Torres. We appreciate that. COVID continues to claim lives, but thousands of police officers across the country are refusing to get vaccinated. In Chicago, almost a third of the police force is not fully vaccinated, and it could cost them their jobs. Megan Fitzgerald has it all for us tonight.
Tonight, fallout in the city of Chicago.
You are willing to get fired for this?
Yes, I am. I hope I don't, obviously, but, you know, I really believe I'm doing the right thing.
Police Sergeant Rick Nigro says he won't be forced to get a COVID shot, defying the mayor's vaccine mandate that went into effect over the weekend.
There's too much government control in that. You're going to tell me what I'm going to put in my body. That's my choice. And the result is you're going to terminate me?
Termination on the line for possibly thousands more, as only 64% of the force is fully vaccinated.
How many officers have not complied with the mayor's orders?
The unofficial number we have is about over 3,200, so about a third of the department.
Continuing a months-long standoff with Mayor Lori Lightfoot at a time when crime in the city is surging.
They're not going to risk their careers by being insubordinate.
Similar mandates taking effect across the country. In Seattle, a state trooper snapped, quitting in a video that's gone viral.
This is the last time you'll hear me in a state patrol car.
Seattle has seen resistance, but so far, 91% of the force is vaccinated.
Our goal here is not to lose employees. Our goal is to get everybody vaccinated.
In Los Angeles, a county-wide mandate goes into effect on Wednesday, but the sheriff says he won't enforce it.
I don't want to be in a position to lose 5–10% of my workforce overnight on a vaccine mandate, while at the same time our bare bones with the funding effort.
Delta Airlines not enforcing a mandate either, instead charging employees who don't get vaccinated $200 a month. So far, the company reporting 90% compliance. But the struggle to vaccinate the country continues, even though resistance can come at a cost.
And Megan Fitzgerald joins us now from Chicago. Megan, is there any way Chicago officers can keep their jobs without getting vaccinated?
You know, it's a good question, Allison, and they can. There is another option here. They can submit biweekly COVID tests. That's something that's acceptable until December 31st, but it's something that comes at the officer's expense, Allison.
Thanks for that. And tonight, FBI agents are in Haiti to aid in the rescue of kidnapped American missionaries. 16 Americans and 1 Canadian kidnapped on Saturday. 5 children are among the missing. The abductions putting Haiti's chaos into sharp focus. Sam Brock has more.
48 hours after the start of an international crisis and 1 day after an FBI team touched down in Haiti, still no answers about whether 17 kidnapped missionaries will be rescued or how.
The FBI is part of a coordinated U.S. government effort to get the U.S. citizens involved to safety.
Part of that effort, a State Department team now also on the ground. The Ohio-based Christian Aid Ministries says among those abducted are 16 Americans, 5 of whom are children. On the streets of Port-au-Prince and Miami today, pleas for help for those living in violence.
You can get out to find food because if you get out, they're going to kidnap you.
Immigrants' rights protesters lying on pavement, demanding an end to Haitian deportations. After earthquakes, a presidential assassination, and kidnappings forced many to flee.
For your nephews and nieces, do you worry that they will not survive another week, month, year in Haiti?
Every day you live in Haiti, you're lucky. Every single day you live in Haiti, you see another day, you are lucky.
The wave of kidnappings appears to be skyrocketing. A UN report identifies around 330 kidnappings in the first 8 months of the year, or 100 more than all of last year. But a research out of Haiti points to much larger figures, with 600+ kidnappings through September, including a 3-fold increase in just 3 months. Tessa Petit with the Florida Immigrant Coalition was born and raised in Haiti.
It is like living in a war zone. You don't know when you're going to get shot at. You don't know when you're going to get kidnapped.
Dr. Richard Frechette runs this hospital near Port-au-Prince, where it's believed armed gangs control half the city. He has to negotiate with them to get oxygen tanks for COVID patients.
It's hair-raising because you're going to have 40 dead people in your hospital in a matter of hours if you don't succeed. And it's very complex when you have to go through a gang to get the oxygen.
Sam Brock joins us now from Florida. Sam, what more do we know about the gang allegedly behind this abduction?
Yeah, this is a gang, Ellison, 400 Mwozo, that is in the Port-au-Prince area, notorious to police, and they say that they are responsible for kidnapping 5 priests and 2 nuns a number of months ago, and their tactics are known to be brutal, from hijacking people from cars to snatching large groups of kids and other pedestrians off of buses, whatever it takes. In a country that has few if any laws, they're taking brutality to another level. Ellison.
Sam Brock, thank you for that. For more analysis on this situation in Haiti, we're going to bring in Amy Wilnetz. She is a professor at UC Irvine and a contributing editor at The Nation. She has written multiple books on Haiti and joins us now. Amy, this specific incident is not isolated necessarily. Give us an idea of what it is like living in Haiti right now.
Okay, right. The specific incident is not isolated, though it's special in that it concerns foreigners and a bunch of them. But overall, for the past 10 years since the big earthquake of 2010, there have been many, many, many kidnappings, from the little, market lady who sells charcoal in a corner of the market with her friends, to people who ride bicycles and bring things around town, and school children. And so the ransoms for those people are not high, but they're ruinous to those people. And it's changed life in Port-au-Prince and even around the country. The gang responsible for this recent kidnapping of these 17 foreigners has a lot of outlying gang segments all around the country. So it's not just in the capital, but it's very visible in the capital that these are tough times.
Are charitable groups like this one, Christian aid ministries, more attractive targets for kidnappers?
They're attractive, right? But do we see them being kidnapped? Not really. This is a first instance of a very serious kidnapping against a group of foreign aid workers, if you can call them aid workers, at any rate, missionaries or aid workers. We haven't seen it before. Some single people have been targeted for robbery. Some Americans, I believe, have been kidnapped for ransom, but solo. Not like this in a group where it's targeted against the whole group.
So what does this mean, big picture, for the relationship between the United States and Haiti? And could it have any sort of impact on refugees seeking asylum in the United States?
Well, that's an upside I hadn't thought of, but maybe it would be helpful to them because it shows more clearly what a situation they are being dumped into in Haiti, where a lot of those refugees haven't even lived there for 5 years because they've been running away from just this kind of violence. What kind of an effect this particular kidnapping will have on relations between the United States and Haiti? Well, the United States has been deeply enmeshed in Haitian affairs for a long time, and even more so since the earthquake of 2010. And I think we're not going to see a chilling reaction from the United States, but there could be some kind of an intervention on behalf of these people, but that's dangerous. We don't really know what the kidnappers are after. They haven't made their desires public. The Christian aid missionaries, I don't believe they've said yet what it is they've been asked for, if anything. And it seems to me to be actually targeted more against the American government than it does against Christian aid missionaries, to be honest.
Amy Wilnetz, thank you so much for that. Today in Georgia, the trial began for 3 men accused of murdering jogger Ahmaud Arbery. Jury selection began this morning with 600 jurors summoned. Katie Beck takes us inside the Glenn County Courthouse with the latest.
Many have waited to see this day in court, the start of the Ahmaud Arbery trial. The courthouse just a short distance from where 25-year-old Arbery was shot and killed. His family says while jogging in a residential neighborhood.
I'm very, very thankful that I reached this stage in the case where we're going to pick a jury and possibly put these men behind bars forever.
Jury selection could take up to 2 weeks, the court summoning a total of 1,000 people in the small rural community, casting a wide net to ensure the case that sparked national outrage can seat 12 impartial jurors and 4 alternates. 3 men are charged with Arbery's murder: father and son Greg and Travis McMichael, who armed themselves and pursued Arbery, and William Roddy Bryan, a neighbor who joined the chase and recorded cell phone video of the incident. The McMichaels have said they thought Arbery was a burglar, responsible for a string of recent thefts in their area, while Bryan has argued he was just a witness. In a statement, Bryan's defense attorney Kevin Goff telling NBC News Roddy Bryan looks forward to jury selection, the trial of his case, and to returning home afterwards to his family. Attorney for Arbery's father, Ben Crump, feels optimistic about the case.
The video is the most important witness in this entire case.
A case underway, a story now returning to the national spotlight as a final chapter begins. Katie Beck, NBC News, Brunswick, Georgia.
Next tonight, we turn to former President Donald Trump appearing for a civil deposition today. He's facing a lawsuit from protesters who say they were assaulted by members of Trump's security staff during an immigration protest in 2015. Tom Winter has more.
Former President Trump ordered to testify under oath in today's civil deposition. The lawsuit over an alleged assault taking place in the middle of a contentious 2015 campaign filled with protests. On the day he pledged his allegiance to the Republican Party inside Trump Tower. Video captured by a local news station and now central to the suit filed against Trump, his company, the Trump Organization, his campaign, and his bodyguards. The allegations? The protesters say it was right here that Trump's own bodyguards assaulted them, that the signs placed in these planners were destroyed, and their rights to free speech were violated. Protesters say they're seeking damages for pain and suffering, medical expenses, and potentially costly, to Trump, punitive damages. His attorneys have repeatedly told the court that they deny the allegations in the lawsuit. It's just one of 10 suits facing the former president, including a lawsuit by Jean Carroll, who says Trump defamed her when he said she made up allegations that the former president raped her, an allegation he denies. A lawsuit by Summer Zervos, a former Apprentice contestant, that Trump smeared her when he called her a liar after she accused him of subjecting her to unwanted kissing and groping, an allegation Trump denies.
You do not have the right to treat women as sexual objects just because you are a star.
And a lawsuit by Democratic lawmakers and U.S. Capitol Police over the January 6 riots on Capitol Hill.
We fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Trump says he is immune from the suit's claims because he was exercising his free speech.
Tom Winter joins us now from outside Trump Tower. Tom, there is news today that former President Trump filed a lawsuit today related to the January 6th commission. What can you tell us about that lawsuit?
Listen, that's correct. The president today going after this idea that somehow his records, which he might be normally privileged, if he was still in the White House, would be turned over to the January 6th committee. He went after not only the January 6th committee, but also the National Archives today, trying to stop both of them from getting access to these documents. He says he wants the ability to review them first to see if there's anything privileged before they get turned over to the January 6th committee. It's something we're just going to have to follow, and something that was anticipated when all of this first came up.
Thanks, Tom. Also developing tonight, China has reportedly tested a hypersonic missile. The Financial Times reports back in August, China launched a rocket carrying a missile that can travel at 5 times the speed of sound. Courtney Kuby joins us now from the Pentagon with more on this. So, Courtney, we don't know if this was actually a hypersonic missile test, but can you shed a little light on what we do know about this and why it's concerning?
So if, in fact, this was a hypersonic missile that was tested in the way that the Financial Times is reporting, it would be very concerning for the U.S. for several reasons. Number one, this missile, as you mentioned, Allison, flies very fast. It also flies lower than what we generally think of with a ballistic missile. So it flies sort of lower in the lower Earth orbit, and it goes much further than a ballistic missile would. So if this test is accurate, it actually flew around the entire Earth before landing within a matter of miles of a target. So why this is so concerning for the United States is it would be very difficult to not only detect a missile like this, but to stop it. Missile defense systems are generally built for ballistic missiles, which fly higher, not as fast, and generally don't go as far as this one would. So another reason it would be particularly concerning is because it would represent that China is either further along in their hypersonic technology, or at least further along than the United States is acknowledging publicly. So that's why there's so much concern around this, and it's one of the reasons why, as you mentioned in the question, Allison, we don't really know exactly if they did this or not, because neither side is giving us a lot of specifics about what this may have been.
And how is the United States responding to these reports?
So they're not commenting on the specific reports. They just continue to say that they are concerned about China's continued buildup of this technology, a continued efforts to advance their military technology. But the reality here, Ellison, is both the United States and China and other nations like Russia and even North Korea are trying to perfect hypersonic technology. This is one of the biggest weapons races that we've seen in some time in the efforts to try and advance their hypersonics. And that is because exactly the reason that I was describing of why it is so concerning and it's so difficult to stop these hypersonics. They really would hold at risk an adversary on the other side of the world. There's a lot of concern who's going to get theirs and who's going to perfect the technology and then field it first.
Any word from China so far?
So far they're denying it. They're saying that this was some sort of a spacecraft technology test here. But the reality is, as I said, we know the United States, the world knows that China is trying to develop and field hypersonics. So even if this wasn't a hypersonic test, which U.S. officials they're not confirming it, they're not denying it. No one's really pushing back too hard on this Financial Times report. So it's looking like it's probably accurate. We just can't say that with a lot of certainty. But the reality is we know China is trying to develop and field this technology. So even if they haven't perfected it yet, they are certainly moving in that direction.
All right, Courtney Cupie at the Pentagon, our thanks for that. Still ahead tonight, a disturbing story out of Philadelphia. The suspect arrested for raping a woman on a train, but authorities say other passengers on board did nothing. How a train employee stepped in. Plus, the desperate search for a missing 3-year-old after his mother was killed. What we just learned about a person of interest in the case. And the deadly flooding overseas. The search for survivors tonight after heavy rain swept away homes and sparked landslides. Stay with us. Back now with a very disturbing story out of Philadelphia. Police say a woman was raped on a train as passengers watched, but that no one intervened or called for help. Priscilla Thompson has more.
Growing outrage in Pennsylvania after a woman was allegedly raped on a public train, and authorities say none of her fellow passengers did anything to help.
Nobody said nothing. Nobody did anything. That's ridiculous.
It's disgusting.
That's awful. What's wrong with people?
The alleged rape occurred last week on board an Upper Darby-bound train. Police say surveillance video shows other riders in the train car during the attack who did nothing.
It's disturbing that there were definitely people on the L, and no one intervened or did anything to help this woman out.
According to the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, it wasn't until a train employee saw what was happening and called police that help arrived. Officials say transit officers caught the man in the act and arrested him.
This is why we had this male in custody. If they weren't present there, that male would have walked off, and who knows where we would have found him.
35-year-old Fiston Inouye is now in jail, charged with rape and assault. The alleged victim, who police say did not know the attacker, was treated at a nearby hospital and is doing okay, according to police. The transit authority saying the attack may not have gone on as long had a bystander taken action. Writing in a statement, there were other people on the train who witnessed this horrific act, and it may have been stopped sooner if a rider called 911. A spokesperson for the transit line urging anyone who witnesses an emergency on board to call 911 immediately. A reminder many riders aren't taking lightly.
We just need to know that if we were in that position, we want someone to help.
If you see something, say something.
NBC News Now correspondent Priscilla Thompson joins us here in studio. Priscilla, are authorities looking for any of these bystanders?
Well, police say they are watching those tapes to see who was there, how long they were there, and to try to identify some of those folks. Police told our NBC affiliate that this victim was unconscious for part of the attack, and so they're hoping those bystanders can help to piece together what exactly happened. So investigators are saying if you were there, call the Upper Darby Township Police and report it to them them immediately.
All right, Priscilla Thompson reporting on a hard but important story. Thank you so much. When we come back, a parent's heartbreak, the new interview with Gabby Potito's parents, how they say they felt about Brian Laundrie before their daughter's disappearance. Plus, rising tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela after a close ally of Venezuela's president was extradited to the U.S. to face criminal charges. The swift reaction tonight from President Maduro. Back now with Top Stories news feed, and we begin with the search for a 3-year-old boy in Milwaukee. An Amber Alert was issued for Major Harris on Thursday after his mother was found dead in their backyard. Jaheim Clark, who was wanted in connection to the alert, was found dead yesterday of an apparent suicide. Police say Clark is also a person of interest in the murder of the child's mother. Los Angeles County is demanding that Vanessa Bryant, widow of NBA legend Kobe Bryant, take a psych test. Bryant is suing the county for emotional distress after county employees took pictures at the site of the helicopter crash that killed Kobe and their daughter Gianna. LA County now saying the test is needed to prove the photos caused that emotional distress, not the crash itself. A massive Hollywood strike averted over the weekend, but many union workers are not happy. The union, representing 60,000 TV and film workers, settled on a new contract with major studios on Saturday. However, many members are reportedly saying they will vote against it because it does not do enough to address working conditions on set. The strike, which was set to go into effect today, would have shut down film and TV production nationwide. And Amazon looking to hire 150,000 temporary workers this holiday season. It's a 50% increase from the company's holiday push last year. The open positions will be available at Amazon warehouses nationwide. The online retail giant also offering a $3,000 sign-on bonus for some employees. The news comes as a workers shortage threatens to derail the holiday shopping season. And now we turn to the Gabby Potito case as the manhunt for her fiancé Brian Laundrie enters its 5th week. New tonight, the Potito family speaking out about their relationship with Laundrie, that infamous body cam video, and their desperate plea for answers. Here's NBC's Dasha Burns.
Speaking out for the first time since learning from the Teton County coroner the cause of their daughter's death was strangulation. Gabby Potito's parents saying they regret their trust in her fiancé, Brian Laundrie.
He just seemed like a nice guy.
Speaking with 60 Minutes Australia on Sunday.
I worried. I told her to be careful, be safe, make sure to be aware of your surroundings, don't trust everybody. But I felt safe because she was with Brian, and I felt like she would be okay.
Outside looking in, she did look happy. But as we look more and more into this, it might not have been as great as people online perceived.
The couple documented their road trip on social media, painting a picture of an adventurous young couple in love. But body cam video released by police in Utah revealed a very different dynamic. Potito and Laundrie told officers they had been arguing, and when asked if she had been hit, Potito said she hit Laundrie first.
Where'd you hit him?
I slapped him.
You slapped him first?
That exchange, a late clue to Gabby's family that the relationship wasn't as picture perfect as her Instagram may have led people to believe.
I saw a young girl that needed someone to just hug her and keep her safe. I just felt so bad for her. I wish that she reached out to me.
Laundrie returned home to Florida without Potito on September 1st, and then disappeared a few weeks later and hasn't been seen since. The manhunt to find him now entering its 5th week. Potito's family once again alleging the Laundries are hiding information.
I think silence speaks volumes. I believe they know probably, if not everything, they know most of the information.
Steve Bertolino, an attorney for the Laundrie family, called Potito's death a tragedy last week, but reiterated that Brian is not a suspect in Potito's disappearance or death. Bertolino previously stated last month that Brian's parents do not know where he is. Laundrie is the only person of interest in the case. A federal warrant for his arrest alleges he committed debit card fraud between August 30th and September 1st, around the time Potito was last seen alive.
He's a coward.
NBC News reached out to the Laundrie family family attorney for a response to the 60 Minutes interview, and he declined to comment. The coroner last week announced Gabby's body had been in the Wyoming wilderness 3 to 4 weeks before it was discovered on September 19th.
And Dasha Burns joins us now on set. Dasha, as you said in your report, we are in the 5th week of the manhunt. How does someone in 2021 stay off the radar so long?
Yeah, it has been such a long time with seemingly no trace, Ellison. So I reached out to some experts about this, and one former FBI agent told me that from her experience, there are a few possibilities here for how someone could evade law enforcement for this long. One, the person is someone who has considerable preparation, maybe even experience with law enforcement to be able to know and understand investigative techniques for finding someone. Number two, the person could be receiving help from someone else in order to evade law enforcement. And number three, the person could be deceased and has not yet been found. And she said that the likelihood that Brian Laundrie was able to figure out the ins and outs of how law enforcement does their searches, he has no record, no experience with law enforcement, so it's really unlikely that first scenario. So we're left with two potential options. One, that he was or is receiving help from someone, or that he is deceased and has not been found. Ellison.
All right, Dasha Burns, thank you so much for that. To Miami now, where one of the nation's most outspoken advocates for police reform has been fired after just 6 months on the jobs. It comes as more and more top cops nationwide are leaving their post. And former Miami Police Chief Art Acevedo spoke exclusively with NBC's Gabe Gutierrez.
Miami's mayor once called him the Michael Jordan of police chiefs, but tonight Art Acevedo is out of a job after city commissioners fired him just 6 months into his tenure.
Pretty embarrassing episode in a 35-year career.
Is there any further comments? He was fighting corruption and punished for sending a memo accusing city commissioners of interfering with investigations.
That memo sealed my fate. I'm certain of it. When you take on the powers to be, you know, it's the consequence that you face.
Shouldn't you have tried to work within the system more instead of against it?
We have to be soldiers to the Constitution of the United States. And when I saw some of the things that I documented in my memo, I don't regret at the end of the day doing what I did, because we're the soldiers of the law. You stick to what you think is right.
But his critics say Acevedo lost the trust of the rank and file, used offensive language at a protest, threatened suspension of unvaccinated officers, and said the force was run by the Cuban mafia.
Do you regret saying that?
Yes, because it was used for political gain by some. But also I do believe that members of the exile community, some of them, I'm part of that exile community, that it was hurtful to them.
Acevedo had become a national advocate for police reform after leading departments in California, Austin, and Houston.
I've been known to be brutally honest. And sometimes it's great for you and sometimes it's bad for you, but at least people know what I'm thinking, which I think is important, is to be a straight shooter.
But he also drew intense criticism there after a botched drug raid.
Let me list a couple of adjectives that people have used to describe you. Outspoken.
Yes.
Brash.
Can be, yes.
Grandstander.
I would say that use the bully pulpit that these positions bring, yes.
What is your biggest regret during your tenure here in Miami?
Not doing my homework before agreeing to come here.
He hopes to continue his career in public service, growing emotional when asked about his father.
I'm not a quitter. My mom and dad didn't come here for us to be quitters, and I don't plan on quitting on being a voice for this profession and being a voice for the good police officers in this country and a voice for those that are disenfranchised by bad police officers.
Gabe Gutierrez joins us now from Miami. Gabe, there's been talk about Acevedo getting into politics. Did he mention anything about possibly running for office?
Well, Allison, that's always been a question when it comes to Art Acevedo. I asked him directly, and he wouldn't commit to running for office, only saying that he wants to continue his career in public service. But you speak with him, and he does have thoughts about police reform nationwide, it would not be a surprise if at some point down the line he did choose to run for office somewhere in the U.S. Elsa?
Now to top stories Global Watch, and we begin with deadly flooding in southern India. Days of heavy rain causing rivers to overflow, cutting off towns and villages. More than 24 people have been killed, including children. The death toll expected to rise, with many residents missing after homes were swept away. Deadly landslides have also been reported. Russia says it's suspending its diplomatic mission to NATO. Staff at NATO's Moscow office will also be stripped of their accreditation by November. It comes after the organization expelled 8 Russian diplomats earlier this month, accusing them of working as intelligence officers. And now to the Americas, focusing on stories from the U.S. and across Latin America. We begin with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro threatening retaliation after the United States extradited a Colombian businessman and close ally of Maduro to face criminal charges. Von Hilliard reports.
The United States today heightening tensions with Venezuela, bringing this man, a close ally of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, in front of a Florida judge on Monday. Alex Saab, a Colombian businessman, extradited to the U.S. this weekend, facing charges of siphoning off hundreds of millions of dollars intended for low-income housing units, using the money the Department of Justice says for bribery schemes.
What is the U.S. hoping that Alex Saab gets them?
The U.S. has long argued that Venezuela was a criminal state, that it was facilitating criminal activities globally. And Alex Saab was largely at the front of that on behalf of the Maduro regime. The hope is that Alex Saab is going to shed light on sort of the criminal networks.
Extradited from the West African island nation of Cape Verde, Saab, for years, has been a focus of the DOJ. Venezuela's Maduro denouncing the arrest, calling Saab a diplomat for his country.
Un secuestro en toda la línea del gobierno de Estados Unidos para un diplomático internacional.
The extradition adding fuel to the standoff between the U.S. and Venezuela. But the Biden administration, like the Trump administration, continues to recognize Juan Guaidó, not Maduro, as the country's president, and has maintained economic sanctions against him. Nearly 3/4 of all Venezuelans live in extreme poverty, and millions have already left. And now, holding on to his power, Maduro apparently retaliating against the U.S., imprisoning this weekend the Citgo six U.S. oil executives whom the Venezuelan government charged with embezzlement in 2017 while on a business trip, and is forced to stay in the country since. The U.S. State Department has called for the unconditional release of the six in the past, calling it wrongful detention.
There's no windows, there's no air conditioning, there's no running water.
Cristina Vidal's father, Tomeu Vidal, is one of the six. She, along with her mom, waiting for his safe release from Venezuela and return home to Lake Charles, Louisiana.
What is your message to the Biden administration right now?
Clearly, if we have the resources, right, to bring somebody like Mr. Saab, the United States has resources to figure out how to bring innocent Americans home, like my father.
Von Hilliard joins us now. Von, it is no secret that U.S.-Venezuelan relationships have been strained for quite a while now. How much of an impasse is this for relations?
Right, and I mean, these allegations against Saab are long from the U.S. government, and this is years of buildup. I mean, part of the allegations are hundreds of millions of dollars that he funneled away from a food distribution program. You're talking about 75% of that population in extreme poverty, hunger, and yet they allege that this man helped funnel hundreds of millions of dollars away from that very program. But you're talking about Venezuela here. This weekend, Maduro calling off those talks with the opposition party. Not that those talks were making significant progress. Of course, these were opposition talks with Juan Guaidó's party here. But at the same time, this is an already stressful situation for the U.S. and Venezuela. In their relationship, this only adds to it.
All right, a lot to unpack here, a complicated story. Thank you for breaking it down so well. And still ahead tonight, the Department of Justice accused of racism. Officials trying to crack down on spies at American universities, but critics say it's just alienating Chinese and Chinese-American students. The details up next. A Justice Department effort to root out Chinese espionage at universities has run into a buzzsaw of controversy. A series of criminal cases brought by prosecutors against professors and researchers as part of the so-called China Initiative have fallen apart. Critics are accusing the government of overreaching, and Asian American groups are concerned the FBI has engaged in racial profiling. Ken Delanian has more.
Tonight, the Justice Department under fire, accused of racism over its so-called China initiative, a department-wide push to crack down on espionage at American universities. Ching Wong worked 21 years in a prestigious American lab looking for genes that cause heart disease. Then, last year, the FBI came to his door.
For years, he was a respected Cleveland Clinic doctor.
It was a big story, and the case looked strong. In a 25-page complaint, the Justice Department accused Wong of deliberately hiding his ties to a Chinese university. He was arrested and taken to jail. He spoke to us from his hotel room in Shanghai.
It was a huge shock to me.
What was going through your mind at that moment?
I thought, everything is finished.
But in July, without explanation, the Justice Department dropped the charges, the latest in a series of prosecutions to unravel under the so-called China initiative. Wong's lawyer said that all his client did was make mistakes on forms designed to disclose conflicts of interest.
To date, the China initiative has not produced the results which justify alienating Chinese and Chinese American academics in American universities who are essential to our innovation system.
The China initiative grew out of a concern that American universities were being targeted by Beijing, which wants to siphon away technology and research.
The real question for the DOJ should be, how much risk can we tolerate while keeping our universities open, while keeping them the best in the world?
Few dispute that Chinese spying in America is a major problem, but critics say the Justice Department's focus on academic institutions is misguided. Hundreds of prominent professors signed a letter to the Attorney General saying that the China initiative amounts to racial profiling.
Our greatest strength is our openness. And if we wind up thwarting the ability of people to exchange ideas, we will not make discoveries. We will not be the leaders.
Last month, a Chinese-born researcher at the University of Tennessee was acquitted by a judge of failing to disclose ties to China. In July, 5 cases against Chinese researchers were dropped in a single day.
Do you think racism is at play here?
Absolutely. Why do you target only Chinese people? Collaboration is going on everywhere.
In a statement to NBC News, the Justice Department said it is determined to counter unlawful Chinese government efforts to undermine American national security, but also takes seriously concerns about discrimination and is committed to working with affected communities to build upon and improve the department's efforts. The Cleveland Clinic said in a statement that it fired Wong for policy violations. Now he's looking for work in China.
The U.S. worries they're going to lure scientists and their ideas and their research back to China.
Right. I'm pretty sure many people will move back to China. So that actually they are doing a favor to the Chinese government.
Ken Delanian joins us now. Ken, what else is the Justice Department saying about this? Is there any talk of change?
Ellison, the Justice Department is standing behind this effort tonight because they say that Chinese efforts to acquire American technology are a huge threat. And in fact, the FBI is opening a new Chinese economic espionage case every 12 hours. But some former officials I spoke to are urging a different approach. For example, one is saying that the government should offer amnesty to professors who have relationships with Chinese universities so that they can come forward and disclose those ties without any risk of prosecution. So far, Ellison, the Biden administration has chosen not to go that route. Ellison.
All right. Ken, thank you so much for your reporting. We appreciate it. And coming up, in sickness and in health, the couple getting married inside a hospital that saved the groom's life after he contracted COVID-19 twice. Plus, their inspiring message tonight. Stay with us. Finally, tonight, after a long battle with COVID, one Michigan couple decided they couldn't wait a day longer to get married. That couple tying the knot at the hospital with healthcare staff acting as the flower girl and ring bearer. Take a look.
Mr. and Mrs. Gill.
This is a moment that almost didn't happen. COVID-19 sent Devlin Kuehl knocking on death's door.
Well, I've had it twice now, and you just don't know. And each time it seems to get a little worse. I've been on a ventilator. I've been where I just out of my mind. I mean, not knowing where I was at. I didn't recognize anybody. It was miserable.
Devlin says he did not get vaccinated because he'd already had COVID-19. He thought he could wait a few months before rolling up his sleeve, but he tested positive again and wound up in the ICU at Sparrow Hospital. Did you ever have a moment where you thought you might not make it through this?
Oh, I had many days where I didn't think I would make it through it.
Now COVID-free, but still on the mend, Devlin was able to leave his hospital room to marry the love of his life inside the hospital that saved his. And this isn't about regret. This is about cherishing life.
Do what you want to do. Don't wait.
Right.
Don't wait. Because we've been waiting, and because we thought we'd want to have a big wedding and we wanted to make sure everybody would be a part of it. But, you know, obviously every time we tried to plan things didn't go the way we wanted them to. So it's just important that we're together, and that's it.
Right. Well, I get to marry my love. And hopefully I'll get a chance to go home, and we got a nice new house and we can enjoy that together.
To Mr. and Mrs. Kuehl, and a life full of happiness. Devlin tells us that he hopes to go home, leave the hospital sometime this week, and be back in that house with his new wife, Laurie. Thank you so much for watching Top Story. I'm Ellison Barber in New York. Tom Llamas will be back here tomorrow night. Have a great evening.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.